And then I'll close or whenever I end the meeting, I'll stop the recording then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mackenzie. I'm the session manager for this session. And I'm going to do a quick little introduction of just what this session is going to be about and who our speaker is. So, as I'm sure most of you guys are aware, we are going to be talking about how to have OER comply with different federal regulations for accessibility and how to make sure different OER is as accessible as it can be for as many people as possible. And our speaker today is Charity Davenport, and she is coming from the Poughkeepsie State Community College, and she is an instructional technology specialist. So we're really excited to have her here, and I'm really excited to be here. Let me know if you guys need anything, and I'll be in the meeting too. Thanks, Charity, and thank you, John.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for being here. So yes, I'm Charity Davenport. I'm from Pellissippi State Community College in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I definitely had to make sure that my time zones were correct because I am not good at that. So I'm glad I'm here on time. Thank you for having me. And yes, we're going to be talking about two of my biggest passions, which is OER and accessibility. Um, So a little bit about me. I am an instructional technology specialist focused on accessibility. That is my job now at Pellissippi, but before I came to Pellissippi, I was an ESL instructor at the University of Tennessee. And as an ESL instructor, I was very unhappy with our textbooks, and I'm also a huge Greek mythology nerd. And so I thought, what if I just made a textbook in all of my free time? And so I made an OER textbook that uses Greek mythology to teach ESL. And my last year teaching at the University of Tennessee, I actually got an award for that project. So um, I didn't know a lot about accessibility when I made my textbook, so this presentation's kind of also I need to practice what I preach and go back to my OER textbook and make it more accessible. So we're going to talk about why this is important. We'll talk about kind of three things very quickly to look at when it comes to accessibility. Um, and we'll talk about there's if you use LibreText or if you're interested in using putting your OER in LibreText, it does have an accessibility checker, how to check other OER websites for accessibility, and probably the most important part to me is writing and developing an accessibility statement for your OERs. So, why is this important? Well, yes, you may have heard that I want to say recently, but it's been almost a year now that the Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, was updated, saying, well, we've had the ADA since the 90s, so it's not really new. The only big updates is that they are going to use the WCAG 2.1 AA as the standard. That's basically a checklist for web accessibility, and they have a deadline. And that deadline for most government institutions, including universities and colleges, is April of next year. So we had 2 years, now we've got 1 year. It's coming up. Why this is important for us? It means Instructors need to look at their own created materials, but they also need to look at the textbooks that they're using. For instructors that are, trying to look at the accessibility for traditional textbooks, most publishers have something called a VPAT, a voluntary product accessibility template, that they can give to people to quote unquote show that their product is accessible. I have the kind of like sneaky looking dude here because a lot of times they're still not accessible, but they have something that talks about the accessibility of their product. OER is probably just now having something like that. So I feel like we really need to start making sure that any OER that we're making, any OER we've made in the past, that we need to go back, check for accessibility, have an accessibility statement that functions in the same way as these VPATs. Because otherwise, instructors are going to say, well, we can't use this OER. We don't know if it's accessible. And we need to improve adoption of OER with our instructors. So I'm hoping we can learn something to get over that barrier. More important reasons to me why it's important is because we need to have equal access. That's why we have the ADA in the first place. Digital accessibility ensures that everyone has equal access to learning and that digital materials are compatible with assistive technologies. I think a lot of times people say, oh yeah, OER is accessible. You can just go to the website and it's there. But digital accessibility is more complicated than that. A lot of people with disabilities, they're using technology tools that depend on the back end being designed properly to function with those tools. And if you don't know how to do that, which a lot of people don't really know about how to make things accessible, it's not going to be compatible. It's not going to be accessible to them. And also we are learning, more and more people are having learning about disabilities, especially invisible disabilities. 1 out of every 4 Americans have a disability. And some examples of those invisible disabilities are neurodivergence, which includes autism and ADHD, some mental health issues like depression and anxiety. A lot of long COVID is also a very big one, traumatic brain injury. So it affects a lot of people. And actually, it kind of just affects everyone. If it's better designed with accessibility in mind, it's going to be better for everybody. Speaking of better for everybody, accessibility also usually involves universal design for learning. That's kind of like a big, broad picture of accessibility. For me, talking about this with OER, it's thinking about, is this OER available in other formats? That kind of goes with this multiple means of representation. Is it only on a website? Is it only a Google Doc? Is it only a PDF? There should definitely be an editable format. PDFs are really hard to edit. There's a lot of barriers for that. Websites, I'm just gonna have to like just copy paste and then put it somewhere. So making sure there's an not edible. I just had lunch. Editable format, but also making sure there's different ways that it can be downloaded. EPUBs are, if it comes from a website, if it's designed accessibly, EPUBs can be an extremely helpful accessible format. And then sometimes if you are using like an OER website platform, they may have some assistive technology tools already built in, like text-to-speech, immersive reader, and things like that. So usually we have these 3 things. Multiple means of representation, I think, is the most important for OER. Now, getting down to the nitty-gritty about accessibility, my whole job is accessibility. I could talk for a million hours about it, but I only have 30. The six most important things that people can do for accessibility is this sculpt model here. I really like this model because it's very simple. That's making sure the structure is good. So making sure in your website or in your document, you use headings correctly. There's only one heading one. That's usually the title of the whole thing. Heading two would kind of be like chapters, and then heading threes would be like the subchapters. This also includes making sure you're using the formatting for bullets and lists properly. Those are really important for people using screen readers to navigate the document or the website. And it's also really helpful if you're using Word or something and it's very long, it kind of makes an automatic table of contents. So it makes it easier for everybody to navigate that. Color contrast is also super important. Making sure that the text is readable and the background color is not interfering. This is helpful for anyone who is colorblind, which there, I think, is 7% of men have some form of color blindness. It's also helpful for anyone who has a visual impairment or older people that can't see so well. Just making sure, first of all, that you don't just use color alone. So, for example, don't say, hey, look at this paragraph highlighted in yellow. And here's a paragraph highlighted in blue. Well, what if I don't know the difference between yellow and blue? So having a different mechanism, maybe like an icon to show the difference instead of just using color, but also just using color contrast for text and background as well. Use of images is making sure you have alternative text for images, making sure you have extended descriptions. If you have a chart or a graph, some kind of visual that's very complicated, there needs to always be some kind of alternate way that someone can access that information. If someone's blind, if their internet's down, the picture doesn't load, there's still that text that they'll be able to read. For hyperlinks, that means when you give out a URL, don't just copy paste the link. If someone is using a screen reader, it just says http://w. It reads the whole thing, and it doesn't really tell them where it's going. So that also means maybe I use a hyperlink and say, click here. Click here also does not tell me where this link is going. So making sure you use hyperlinks and making sure that they have a good, short but sweet description of where that link is going. For plain English, that's trying to make sure, I know that's hard for like textbook stuff, but making sure it's at like I think an 8th grade reading level. If that's not possible, maybe have a vocabulary list or a glossary. This is also making sure that you have readable fonts, and fonts are at a good size. They're not too small. And last, oh my goodness, what time is it? Last is table structure. Just imagine you're blind. There is on the screen some kind of table. You're using some kind of mechanism to read everything on the screen. Tables have to be formatted in a way so that someone can actually understand the relationship between what's in the top row, what's in the side row, and what is in the data cells. So that's just making sure you're using simple tables, you don't have merged or split cells, you've designated the top row to be a heading, and also not using tables outside of data. I used to do that when I had a website. I used tables a lot to make the picture and the text to look really nice, and then I make the table invisible. Yeah. I stopped doing that after I learned about this. Use tables to sort data. So those are kind of the big six things to think about. This is also true no matter if you're in WordPress designing something, you're in Pressbooks, you're in another OER tool, you're in a website, Google Docs, Word, PDF. It works for everything. So that's kind of for like static stuff. For multimedia, if you have videos, of course, you need to make sure you have captions. Some people ask, well, when I put it in YouTube, it auto-generates captions. That's wonderful. Well, I mean, it is. It's better than not having captions at all, but it has to be edited by a human to meet the ADA requirements. We know that auto captions can be helpful, but they're not always correct. They may have spellings that are wrong. So they really need to be edited by a human being. It's also really good to have access to a transcript. So one thing that's good about YouTube is you can open up the transcript on the side. At Pellissippi, we use Microsoft Stream, and that does something similar. It looks really nice. And um, it's not yet like a requirement for WCAG standards, but those who are blind, if there's like action or something happening on the screen that is the context of what's happening in the video, they really need to have audio descriptions. So for example, if this picture were a video, maybe the audio description would be someone saying, there is a black female child on the screen. She has a hearing aid and she is communicating through American Sign Language. So it would say that. It's kind of like alt text, but it's audio. That's what an audio description is. If you are making videos from scratch in your OER, you may want to consider just going ahead and kind of building in those audio descriptions in your videos so that you don't have to do it later. For audio, we need, again, there are different tools where it can go from like speech to text or audio to text and auto generate a transcript. Just make sure that you go back and edit that transcript. Okay. So my book is in LibreText and I need to go. As you can see, there's an accessibility compliance review matrix here. I love that LibreText does have like an accessibility checker and helper, but I need to go back and check it. But I like that it has something like that. I don't know if there's a lot of tools that have a built-in accessibility checker. Definitely if you're using Word, it does. Adobe Acrobat does, but it's really hard to use. So just a shout out to LibreText. I like their emphasis on accessibility. So yes, it's good to use accessibility checkers in addition to using those sculpt things because accessibility checkers, it's a robot. We know how robots work. They're not perfect. It's good to have a manual check as well as the auto check. Word has it, PowerPoint has it. They're not so great about color contrast though, and the hyperlinks. So that's why you should make sure you use the sculpt rules. Google Docs does not have an accessibility checker. So my advice is convert it to Word and use the Word document. Check it in the Word accessibility checker. Yes, PDF has, you have to get the license for the Pro version. It's super hard to use. I cry every time I use the PDF accessibility checker. And for websites, there is this wave tool that will point out kind of the same things we talked about. Maybe something's wrong with headings, the color contrast, these hyperlinks. It will look at websites and find those errors. So let's say, okay, you've gone through, you're working on an OER, or you're going back and looking at one of the OERs that you've created, making it more accessible. You really need to put an accessibility statement so that people know that you've made these checks. And so that can help instructors, it can help anyone who wants to adopt your OER to make sure that it has these accessibility checks. Accessibility statements, I think, look a little different from like a VPAT. You, of course, you want it to be clear. Um, where's my pointer? You want information about how people can personalize their experience. So like I was saying, like if that platform has, like they have, for example here in Pressbooks, you could say, well, Pressbooks has the ability for you to enlarge the font. There might be, there's something called Immersive Reader that has a lot of good tools in it. If it has like a text-to-speech reader, point those things out. If it's been tested by different assistive technologies, maybe list those assistive technologies. Outline specific accessibility features and how to use them when it's relevant. I really like this one. Don't make false claims or ignore known accessibility issues. This is the big problem with dealing with the vendor or publisher materials. They have a VPAT, but a lot of times it's not correct. And they're trying to hide things. Be transparent, be open about accessibility barriers. If there are things, just talk about what is being worked on. When will that be finished? If something is not working or accessible, is there another, alternate format or a temporary workaround? If someone finds an accessibility issue, they should have a contact information of someone to tell them, oh, there's an issue. So yeah, make sure you include information who's responsible for the accessibility, the contact of the content and their contact information so people can submit issues, suggestions, complaints, so that can be worked on and fixed. And then describe your organization's accessibility policy and the work that has been done to make the resource accessible. Of course, you can talk about the Title II of the ADA, the standard that they're using, which is WCAG 2.1 AA. I have a link at the end of the presentation if you want to know what those standards are. Um, and yeah, again, any type of testing that was done with assistive technologies. The two most famous screen readers are JAWS and NVDA. And all of this information, I also have a link to it. I got it from another OER resource. So I think we have time. I just wanted to look at an example accessibility statement. And of course, it's not working. So I'll go here. Let me make sure. Yes, you're seeing the screen. This is from that same resource, and I have a link to it at the end of these slides. I went ahead and I think everyone should have access to these slides. So they have kind of like their statement about accessibility. They talk about what they've done to make it accessible. There's easy navigation. They make sure they've had headings. For this example, they have accessible math equations. That's a whole nother world, is making sure that the weird math symbols are accessible. This says there's videos, they have captions, all images have alt text, and that all links have descriptive link text. And here they've kind of gone over kind of like a little WCAG standard checklist here to talk about their accessibility. They have in this template a place for known accessibility issues and areas for improvement. Here's that contact information section. Here's how to contact us, and then like an update date. And so I think this is a really good template just copy paste for what you need. So yeah, for example, if your OER doesn't have videos, then you don't need that in your checklist. If your OER doesn't have H5Ps, you can take that out of your checklist. So I think this was a really good resource that I hope you'll use, because it's like, I don't know. First of all, I may not know about accessibility, and now I got to write up this accessibility statement. I think this will be a really good template to use. Right. This sounds like a lot of work, Charity. How am I going to do this? So hopefully you've got some other people on your campus that you can work with. Of course, any OER people in your library. A lot of times libraries may have their own accessibility team. Campuses will have their team. If it's online materials, distance education may help. And your teaching and learning center. Try to get as many people on board and don't be afraid to ask for help because it's a lot of work. How do I do this? I would pick the one output that you want to work on first and which would be the most important. That was kind of the big pain for mine was I had a website version, I had a PDF version. It was really hard to maintain both of those. I know that Pressbooks does have a way to export to PDF. It has a way to export to EPUB. So maybe make your web version accessible and then just make sure that that goes out to the other formats as well. When do I do this? One thing at a time. One document, one page, one chapter, one at a time. Use that sculpt method, use those accessibility checkers. I think usually once you start doing that, it just becomes part of your process as you're making your OER, and that saves so much more time. It is much more time to do what I'm going to do and retrofit now that the OER is finished. Now I gotta go back, make sure it's accessible. And then, yeah, make sure you update your accessibility statement when you've made those milestones and you've checked your OER. Okay, good timing. Thank you. Are there any questions? And then here's just my list of resources while you guys have any comments or questions. I'll look in the chat. The Wave browser extension will work if you're signed into a site. Which resource is the accessibility template? I think both these Pressbook pages, the accessibility toolkit for authors of OER and the Open Voices Just Choices OER Social Justice Faculty Handbook. Both of those had really good information. I've used the Wave tool, but wasn't sure how to remediate problems. It is a thing of like for Wave, it's just telling you there's problems, but not really how to fix them. You'll have to go back into whatever website tool you're using to fix it. And I don't know, depending on the website tool, it may or may not have its own accessibility checker. I'm not sure if Pressbook does or other, I know that paid WordPress accounts or hosted accounts, there's like a plugin that can maybe check. You just have to go in and like, oh, it said the headers were wrong. So then you just go back in and, okay, I'm gonna fix the headers. Wave extension has good remediation explanations, like, yeah, for those like the sculpt items. So
It looks like Susan Gold had a question as well about how to find an OER, if you find an OER resource but it's not fully accessible, what the next steps are. But we only have 1 more minute.
Yeah, so I've been talking a lot about like if it's our own. For faculty members, I think the first step would be try to contact the author and tell them. The other side is then if you want to use that resource, I mean, it's OER, so it's open. You have every right to be able to make it accessible on your own, but then that puts more time on you. I would say contact them first and then maybe make it. If you do make some pieces of it accessible, I would try to send those to them so that it can be like, hey, here, update it, please.
Well, that is exactly our time. Thank you so much, Charity. That was so awesome. Thanks everybody for being here and participating. And I'll see you guys in the next sessions.